We just said, will you say it again?
Yeah, no, I think this is puppy mill too. I mean, I think this is, the Humane Society is gonna say, we already did this, and this is to sort of counteract what the voters decided when they decided that, and we need you to come out, low turnout election, come out, and the people who are the most interested in this, which are a very organized group, and they have been, and they organized before on this issue. So I think there is a possibility that they could mount a decent, fight on this, because they've done it before.
There is risk, though, because while the Humane Society of the United States is probably viewed benevolently here, they're viewed as like an ultra pariah in the rural areas. You accuse somebody of being part of HSUS, it's almost like being a member of the Communist Party in rural Missouri.
And like I said, the last vote we had, that was Jackson County, Kansas City, St. Louis County,
Columbia.
and the city of St.
Right.
Louis, and some of Columbia.
Little bit of Springfield,
versus
yeah.
the rest of the state. And if with a low turnout, and you have the county election, so people will be turning out. If you could remind them that, hey, we had this election, those that opposed puppy mills won, and the legislature couldn't,
They're trying to overturn it.
overturned it. Well, if you get enough of those people to vote, then possibly this wouldn't pass this time.
Well, the Humane Society, I think, made a strategic mistake and for the 2010 thing of going for a proposition, which is a change in state law, as opposed to change in the Constitution. I mean, and basically in Missouri, it's like poker. You need to go big or stay home, because they got the proposition passed. They got the
But everybody keeps going all in.
They got the proposition passed, but if you have a proposition, then the legislature can change it. That's what they did. If it's a constitutional amendment, it's a whole different ballgame. They can't. There has to be a vote of the people again. So that's why the opponents of the puppy mill restrictions, that's why they came back with this right to farm thing, and it's a constitutional amendment, because they know they get this passed, even if it does end up in court, it still pretty much ties the hands of the legislature, at least in the short term.
But you know what? There's so much game playing going on with the Constitution that I think at some point, when we get all of these propositions, and some of you may have some experience with California, they have a ballot that just goes on and on and on with their initiative things. I think at some point the voters start to distrust those things, and they say, as I said when we were talking earlier, if you can't prove to me that this is needed, if you can't tell me what it means, if you can't tell me what it's going to do, then why should I vote for it?
Well, and this is the
That's
poster
the show me
child.
mentality.
Right, but it's also
The
the
show me,
poster.
the show me state,
Right.
right? Sorry.
It's the poster child for, term limit damage. I mean,
It
this
is.
is again, another, symptom of how term limits have frankly ruined this state in a lot of ways politically, because now we have to have a constitutional amendment, because I know I'm gonna be termed, and I don't want some future legislature telling me, to do something different. And they're recognizing their own mortality, which is warped. And I think that's when you see a legislature that has to react to term limits by one, worrying about primaries, or two, worrying about the next office, then you see a lot of ballot and a lot of voter activity, because the legislature, there are things they're just not gonna do, just like transportation. They're not gonna put another tax, they've done it. We're gonna be another 12 years before there's a proposal on transportation for this kind of money. And, so term limits, I think that causes a lot of this. So hopefully the voters will start thinking about that.
But the other thing is that the sales tax is going to be very high. It's going to be over 10%
it's a
in many localities. If this does 3/4% increase, 3/4% increase. It's not a 3/4% increase. It's a 3/4%
Of a
increase.
penny, right.
It's going to be over 10 cents. And the sales tax is an unreliable tax over time.
Volatile.
Because when economic down conditions turn down, then you don't get as much money. The gasoline tax is at least tied to the number of gallons of gasoline being expended on the roads. And it taxes the people who are using the roads,
It's not near
including
enough.
the truckers.
It's not even close, though, and since we've barred
Right.
tolls, how are we gonna make it up to actually
Well-
get to, and that's the challenge.
And then you have a policy shift that took place because the legislature cut about $500 or $600 million in the income tax at the high end.
While raising
Thank you
sales
very,
tax,
thank you
right,
very much.
which really whacks out the balance.
And roads and schools are both essential functions of government. We don't yet have private roads. We have some private schools, but we have, but they're essential tasks of government. And so you take away a funding mechanism of about $500 million, and then you put back a sales tax that is layered heavily on the people who are wage earners, you really have made a massive shift in terms of taking money from the poor and funding things for
And
the
you might
rest
get
of
some
us.
pushback on a lot of that in terms of the income tax and different things on different, but on this particular issue, you have the Show Me Institute, which is conservative think
Yeah.
tank, and you have some of our more liberal aldermen in the city,
Absolutely,
for
they agree.
instance, agreeing that they don't. So are they gambling here with this? If they turn out enough people to defeat this, is it?
They're not spending any money. They don't have an organized group that is counteracting those ads that don't say this is a tax increase.
But it's not hard to tell people, don't tax me. I mean, that's the easiest argument to make without a dime.
That's true. People may not know. Jason brought up a good point that the TV ads right now don't even use the word tax.
Yeah.
So many people be going to the polls and may not realize that this is a 3/4 cent.
As much as I'd like
sales
to, yeah,
tax.
as much as I'd like to, that all the public reads all of our articles and, knows a lot about this, the truth is, some of them may just go by what's in the ads.
So we're amending our constitution on a Twitter-like character limit on the ballot here, where you have a limited understanding of it. And once you amend it, it's done. It's set in stone, unless you can come back with even more energy and effort to undo it.
Not many constitutional provisions or laws get repealed. That's the problem. You usually pile on, you don't usually repeal, which is the challenge.
that's the problem with the term limit situation. That's a
Right.
constitutional amendment. So
Yep.
to get rid of that, you need to have another vote.
I mean, one of the things that's
Yeah,
in
handcuff.
here that probably should have been in the ballot title on the transportation tax is the prohibition on raising the gas tax and the prohibition on tolls. Because don't you think that's an essential piece of this?
Oh, absolutely.
It's not in the ballot title.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
But
it's
there
not-
are other
if
legal
you
problems.
just go to the ballot and you have to decide on the information in front of you, you won't know
That's
that
correct.
you are also prohibiting tolls and
Gasoline
the
tax.
increase of the gasoline tax.
Well, this is it's supposed to be the one-stop shop, that if we do this, you don't get any more MoDOT. I mean, I do think that it has an invidious sort of byproduct, but I think the goal was to say, this is it. This is gonna be the whole shebang of everything we're doing for transportation, and, we'll see if people buy that.
It's just interesting. I mean, MoDOT, which runs so efficiently, been proven. People that suddenly.
Is your tongue in your cheek?
It is, and.
It's dripping, the sarcasm.
Well, and the same people that abhor labor unions, have no use for labor unions, want to bust every labor union in the world, are now buddy-buddy. Because this is all about us making money and you paying for it. And, you can, commercials or whatever, but I think that message is getting across to people that said, like, wait a minute, there's kind of an unholy alliance going on here, and it seems like they want me to pay for it. And I think enough people are wise enough without a massive ad campaign to kind of figure that
Well,
one
I'll
out.
just play devil's advocate. I mean, what's going to happen to our
Roads.
our state economy if we don't do anything about our roads for the
And our
next 12 years?
infrastructure.
Listen, I just had a colleague who is now, I just met him, visiting from Pakistan, a journalist, who asked me what was wrong with our roads. He wanted to know, he's coming from Islamabad, wanting to know what's wrong with our roads. So they're not in great shape from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I mean, I think by any conceivable measure, there probably is a great need to improve our transportation infrastructure, especially our roads and bridges. I don't think that, maybe some people disagree with that, but I think that's generally accepted. I think that with this particular issue, it's whether this proposal is the way to pay for it, whether it's too much, and whether
And if it's going to the right stuff.
and if it's going to the right stuff, and whether it's fair.
So just back to one last question here from me. Do people know the weight of what they're deciding at the ballot? Do they know the difference between voting on a law and voting on a constitutional amendment?
I think the majority don't.
Is that okay?
Not necessarily. And see, one thing about the transportation tax that I think is maybe missed is that some of the groups who are opposed to it are also some of the groups who have been pushing to eliminate the state's income tax entirely, eventually, and replace it with a higher
Sales tax.
sales tax.
And they need room. They don't want to put too much
So,
sales
yeah,
tax
so
on other stuff.
that's one of the reasons they're opposed to this amendment, is because they ultimately would like to raise the state sales tax. And some who say, in order for us
I mean,
30%?
to make up for getting rid of the income tax.
The revenue, the state would have to have a sales tax, I mean, according to some, a sales tax of 20% or more.
Some states
they
don't.
would also
Some
like
states
to
don't have an
downsize
income
government,
tax. and
too,
Washington
so-
State doesn't have an income
They-
tax.
Yeah, but they're relying on tourism or some other things, or they have higher property taxes. like Texas doesn't have an income tax, but Texas has a whole bunch of taxes that Missouri doesn't have.
Well, I will just say, if Rex Singfeld wrote a $1 million check tomorrow to oppose this tax dies.
And he
So-
I
has
think it would take less.
I think you could do it for half that.
Yeah.
What a deal.
Then he's hiring the wrong consultant.
That hasn't happened yet.
So maybe he'll be inspired by this show.
And municipal taxes in Texas are also astronomical.
Right.
They-
There's no
it's-
free lunch, people.
Right.
I mean, and Missouri's been pretty good over the years. I mean, we're basically a fiscally conservative state, and we've been pretty good over the years about keeping a relatively smooth tax base. But now we're pulling straws. We're gonna mess with the income tax without looking at the sales tax. I mean, nobody is looking at the tax code in big picture anymore. And again, term limits, they don't understand it.
The other thing is that the sales tax was passed in the 1930s when we were an industrial economy. Now we're a service economy.
Right.
And I remember in the years that I was on the court, we had all these cases where we were trying to figure out, do you tax lights?